Contention one is blackness, the discussion of domestic surveillance is incomplete without a discussion of invasion, slavery, slave pros, one of examples of disciplinary power that created a racially stratified security system with a high visibility that subjugated black body systems have evolved into contemporary surveillance. Ground 12, the history of surveillance in America can be traced the accounts of slave owners. Accounts included slaves, manifests in human cargo, plantation imageries, and instructions to governing slaves. Detailed cataloging wildlife was a mechanism of disciplinary power where disciplinary power is exercised through the visibility of compulsory visibility on structure, racializing surveillance to the land and the plantation security system relied on information and technology. There's in slave past slave president and one of those this system relied on the racial content of literacy, compulsory visibility of the racial subject can be seen in the circulation of advertising and posters for grown by slaves. These sections are aimed at a white the surveillance technology of the fugitive slave advertising already hyper-visible racial subject and legible out of place. So wanted notice of fugitive slaves that then it's not racial was a social construct that required constant policing oversight and hyper-visibility of most of the condition for political in the black body. Moten 13 is equal to the absence of their useful standpoint to explore and we have a backness existing class standing back there for no standpoint backness is terminology, backness is ontologies, anti-anti-foundation ontologies underground the aircraft surface of ontologies out of space. This is certainly in habits and geographies of the black life that is lived in the program of the center blackness bears a race potential in the world and political death and is the excommunication of the slave. No from the political sphere that marks the slave for unspeakable violence. Moten 13 the secular excommunication that describes slavery is a radical exclusion from apolitical orders, political death that confers the stateless status of the merely barely living, the eradication of the sociality of life and the disjunction between sociality and sanctioned terror to have honors to become a combatant in transcendental subject perpetual civil war on the perpetual civil war, the recognition of civil societies, enmity, hostility, civil bush, political friendship constitutes capacity for unspeakable violence, underwater in the political this is to say blackness as exterior to civil society, social life, not the condition of black life, the field of the political from which blackness is relegated to the social blackness, chooses to say, and contention 2 is the method. Slaves are not passive objects implicated within the play of biopolitics. Consider the story of Uncle Toliver as told in Leon Levack's Been in the Storm So Long. In Nansemond County, Virginia, a slave known as Uncle Toliver had been indiscreet enough to pray out the Yankees. The master's 2 sons ordered him to kneel in the barnyard and pray for Confederacy. But this stubborn old man prayed even louder for a Yankee triumph. With growing exasperation, perhaps even bewilderment, the 2 sons took turns in whipping him until finally the slave, still murmuring something about the Yankees, collapsed and died. One might conclude that Uncle Toliver's death was a nihilistic tragedy meant that his state of subjugation was so entrenched that nothing meaningful could come from it. Yet the aporia of the slave's unintelligent actions of properties, critiquing its property creates a bewilderment and disorientation. And the disorientation of the mass creates the possibility of agency. Motion forward. The story of Uncle Toliver is more than subject and text arises various arrangements of the story who got to tell of the story of a man who got to tell stories that are along the animateriality of his life and the reconstructed voice of the slave, voicing of the slave speaks through the vernacular after the reconstructed voice of a man has held as property rises as a critique of property. Uncle Toliver speaking ensemble and near which given the whole history of Uncle Toliver is the autobiography of ensemble and the history of agency. It's not the recording of the best ego by another ego in search of affirmation. Uncle Toliver prepares the ground for the formulation of disrespect ethic agency is in the tradition of Uncle Toliver. Uncle Toliver's narrative is spread of a chain of investigation that moves from a never fully unveiled encounter to an impossible encounter to come, and the narrative of Uncle Toliver is also already in the process of continual reinvention and oscillating between the planes of nobility and unnobility as it is passed down, translated, and transcribed. It is from this unstable and poor space that black people derive the knowledge of human, the subjectivity to assert that freedom voted for. Uncle Toliver was very good during and transmitted the narrative mediation to explain them argue that uninfluenced is an instant recitation. Though acts not some predatory erasure by the equal loss inherited translation to transmission whose presence spots the ethics of some Uncle Toliver is again lost in this according to history and which is extended at the end of a chain of narratives and where knowledge is given to us in the space of the jargon movements, the space after the site apposition the space of the accounting, the interest of the subjectivity remains to be activated and fugitive is not simply opposition to or transgression of the social functions in a zone of determination that disrupts the relationship between knowledge and existence. It is through this phase of vulnerability that blackness combines social life and social death and motivate. Ontology is made unattainable in a colonized society. In the well-social colonized people, there is an impurity that all ontological explanation of ontology is not permitted us to understand being in the black person phenomenally. Must the black person be black, must be black in relation to white person. The black person has ontological resistance in the eyes of the white person. The black can only be another for white. And is there anything called black social life blackness? Impurity implies a non-completeness of a worldview that non-completeness signals a criminal refusal of the interplay of memory gas in which the fusion movement in and out of the extremely opposed social logic. Fusion movement and stolen life and installation of laws reducible either to interdiction or transgression. What can be attained in the zone in which the occupation own in some sense the fusion law movement that makes black social life ungovernable. The demands of here ontological disruption of the connection between the explanation and existence. Contention 3 is justification and inclusion of the political sphere consigns are strategy failure state-based reforms necessitate co-option and only renovate the right social order as marked on section 3. The process of rewritten white supremacy is always involved with, say, political cataclysms such as the civil rights movement have confronted sanity at the states of absorption of opposition, reconstruction of white social order has been occurring. White supremacy is reconstructed for the maintenance of order. The institutions of society normalize the social field, ethical species as different on the community catalog. These institutional forms rights movement, which understanding stops, take practice created, produce subjects, discourses, and places that are inseparable from the state chair. Because this is not to be debate traditional radical leftist politics. The question is to ask how the state exists as a formation with descended agency, how the subjects, state authority are produced in the crucible of its ritualistic violence. And we don't want to play the oppression Olympics. The affirmative does not preclude the existence of other antagonism. Just that a multi-dimensional analysis from the position of blackness is the best method to usher revolution. Sextant and anti-blackness seems a little less oppression Olympics. Not about a little more than 10 years far. When the notice in this capture the transition of ethical regime into an ethical attack, let's understand the relationship between the central black and Korean and not just about different blacks. This does not present the total reality of the racial formation, but does relate to the totality of the whole range of positions within the racial formation is most fully understood. From the standard point, every defense of the rights and liberties of the victims of the repression for the makes technically does for forces of silence to back the different targets of these practices in the judicial infrastructure built around the box board, only about watching against the intensifying cross-parallel mobile alliance from the anti-black civil society, further magnification of state power, and fugitive creates a framework to which one considers anti-blackness in academia. The judge is an ethical evaluator of performed methods for combating anti-blackness. Moten Hardy 4. The university also this is the only possible relation to the university. The university is a refugee and cannot be accepted that the university is a fiscal license or sneak into the university. So can you abuse hospitality despite its mission begin, but is the path of the subversive intellectual. Rewrite the university call for reform before the subversive intellectual. Let's go down to the implied company. The subversive intellectual came under false pretenses of bad arguments of love. Her labor is as necessary as it is enrolled in the university needs to years. Recognize various years on top of years into the undercommons of life where the work gets subverted, where the revolution is still back so strong, and the state is incurable. And the former slave will always be subject to extreme forms of torture, terror, violence, and dissent. Still in 13, the 13th Amendment recreates and repositions slavery inside the prison. Even as it abolishes it in the free world, the complex system emerged in slavery's aftermath. That kind of stuff. Black people were ended up in charge with crimes in the past. We punished by torture until the mass. The former slaves were arrested and released from private contractors to be working till death. The legal construction of new forms of legal action, new mechanisms for producing human disposability. The complex system was one mechanism of racialized towers of violence. The prison started also a carceral continuum that observes society face. Institutionalized slavery is a destiny and active generation in the market, produced the freedom, capital, ability, and choice in the prison, make after the freedom of study stations, freedom of slavery, dictated meanings of freedom. The freedom of slavery is where the metal in the present evaluated as identified, seduced, embellished, and animated contemporary formations of power. And white people have a moral responsibility to combat racism. Just because they're white shouldn't mean just because they're white doesn't mean we shouldn't try to be anti-racist. Caucus 15. White people of color, every time we do not call it racist actions, especially when there's a chance to do so in white spaces, by calling out anti-Southern racism, the only place white people can go is one step closer to forever in this world of white, racist disease, permeating white bodies. White people are not anti-American Michael Brown, white people have allowed white people to be brain rot, and it is our job to combat racism. White people must work together on a fight that requires many small steps.
Why vote app?
If you vote app, you are acknowledging that the affirmative has an ethical and effective method of combating anti-blackness.
So it's just, so what is your method of combating?
The narrative, the Toliver. We think that reading the narrative creates a space within civil society that allows for the reclamation of black political agency. Because the narrative is unknowable to civil society.
How is the narrative unknowable?
Yeah. So the first piece of motion evidence we read says that the narrative is constantly changing, which means the state cannot
Wait, is this a physical narrative or?
Is it the Uncle Toliver narrative?
Yes, like that.
How is it constantly changing?
Yeah, so every time like it is repeated or like transcribed or translated, it like evolves and it has.
So what does that have to do with songs? Like what something does? So what you're not your affirmative does.
Yeah. So by reading the narrative, we are creating a space within like this room, and I guess within the state that is free from like the state's ability to oppress the black body, and then it creates a space for like the black body to be playing political.
Wait, how are you creating space in the state when you're rejecting it?
Yes, the narrative like creates a space. Yes, we are not using the state because we think the state is bad.
Like, how do you know people are going to accept this narrative?
Like, what do you mean?
Like, how are they going to conform to this narrative?
You don't need
in terms of the app?
You don't want anyone to conform to the narrative. Like, you just think the narrative is an effective method.
Okay, so like, how are you saying that people in Congress and the House will be accepting this and they'll be changing their policies for it?
What do you mean? Like, well, wait, I don't get it.
So what's fugitivity in the context for app?
Fugitivity is basically working outside of the state to subvert it.
Okay, so what does that have to do with the narrative?
Yes. So Uncle Toliver was oppressed by slavery. Obviously, he was a slave, and even when he was faced with death, he defied his masters and he prayed for the Yankees. you reclaim political life by defying like the expectations of civil society that a slave obey, and by doing so, you reclaim its agency. We think by focusing on that, the state cannot understand it, and the narrative and reading it is
Do
an
you think
effective.
the state can understand it? How do you know that they'll be able to understand it?
No, they won't. That's the point.
Okay. So how as white people in your caucus, 15 Ovens, how do we have a responsibility to combat racism? Like, how will we do it?
Yeah, so like white people have white privilege. However, that does not mean that they should not like call out racism and discuss it and then try to like combat it. You don't think that we should just like accept it?
Wait, so then what is the job of the white person in terms of your caucus 15 card?
Like, I'm not sure if that's necessarily
Is
the
the
job.
job read the narrative? Sorry.
That's not necessarily what the job is. We just think that like we should do this.
We should.
We just think
do
that
this.
like I just think that
We should
coming
have
after
this
violence is good. This discussion is good.
Okay,
Discussion
so
of whether the narrative works or not? What's the discussion?
I guess you could say the discussion is yes. It's like the affirmative and effective method of combating anti-blackness. As when I see good. Is the narrative good?
No crap. Where's the flash drive?
I'm gonna need some paper now. Check.
two up?
Yes.
Do you need more than 2 sheets of paper for this?
I would say now. I would say future.
Okay, gotcha.
Wait, what?
There's not for this week.
Not for now,
That's
gotcha.
so shit.
Okay.
Wait, isn't it?
Oh, wait, 3 off.
There we go.
You got it. Anyone not ready? First interpretation, the federal must defend the hypothetical limitation of a plan by the United States federal government. The U.S. United States federal government should be limited solely by the outcome of policy established by the government means very clean 3. The U.S. should adopt policy action and subject should urgent action should adopt means implemented policy action and the government means B. Violation of the implementation of the plan as a reason to vote for a CR interpretation best policy creating confrontation engagement and empathy clear rules a stable topic institutional role planning and limits planning and stimulations are key to Atlantis and 8. Simulation games and role player active teaching and learning approaches they provide students with a real imaginary environment that they get it out of the situation and enable students to actively think about what they meant in a particular situation simulation display students with a structured environment and ask them to take on a specific role serial scenarios permits to students' personal experiences flexible experts recommend that academic or simulations should be taken into account in designing effective simulation building simulation and around specific educational objectives carefully educating the topic of studying, establishing the needed roles to be played by the students and the instructor, providing clear rules to the instruction and background material. And switch side debate solves any possible offense that gain through student education on the neck. Also creates better education because switch side lets you understand opposing arguments to strengthen your own. And next is topic specific education. Debates are mandated and necessary. You're thinking now. Outlays your education into most of 14. Edison's collection of funding to reduce the remainder of the providers and the necessary require judicial permission. The investments and the effectiveness of the program was one of the reasons the report in place. I have to switch back to me with the greater scrutiny. I should the value of public debate and adverse so the process. And only debates about engaging institutions can reduce social change, distinction from politics factions, coalitions, and reinforces conservatism. That's movement 9. The applicant withdrawal from existing institution radical multi-stimulus characterized by the feeling that itself is inherently the problem, the which challenge the demonic order could regulate the system, which she must satisfy them in a way that neutralizes their subversive potential. Radical politics is not drawing. We have no choice but duties with hegemonic crisis or challenge. You see as a monolithic apparatus of domination that cannot transcend the problem proper by political invention, always the elimination of certain aspects of the same maturity. Another important aspect of politicalizing the establishment relations between various domains. The state further by critique further involves their engagement. The aim is to critique common bond, common will engagement with a wide range of institutions with the aim of transforming them. And next is competition theory. Affirmatives that do not depend on a stable topical plan. Next, fundamentally applicational competition theory. The lack of action or process about the 1AC must be understood as a stable, completed political statement. Three implications. First, they do not get permutations. Even if they're consistent with the alternative, the first question is whether they're considered the justification for set alternatives, which is the link paid. It's not offensive, but it is admission that the 1AC can be improved. And any word in a vacuum is viable link ground. They must be able to defend innovation spending choice regardless of the overall message. Wordings are specifically just defending community activity word choice is critical to effective political writing and advocacy, but the lack of popularity means picks are necessary to get back to the square one. And omission is permission. Their political statements are notable for silence, for noise, seclusion, or viable negative ground. On to the next off. Their attempt to mark blackness is organizing political principles, sanitize neoliberalism, and evacuates the political and economic order that produces the contemporary novelist nations. Reading 13. They are about the history of the autonomous block agency, the targeted cost political and economic problems, the psychology, trends, and justice, disrespect remedies, proposed like self-esteem government. Nothing can be indicated more strictly than the extent of neoliberal economic representational practice constitute meaningful trade for struggle. Their content is ideological, this is a contribution to the national neoliberalism. Ontological as the propaganda is across spatial and social contexts, is blindness to political economic notion, black culture, psychological damage that's either legacy or slavery discourse and feedback to self-esteem, engineering distribution is noted to the larger political economy relations. This faces political challenges, social produces inequality that exerts for feeling and characteristics of individuals. And specifically, their focus on race becomes an alibi for acquiescence of class struggles. They obscure the logic of capital and ensure repetition of oppression of Czar's 1994. Post-logic is marked by the ensure production is underwriting the determining force organizing society. Labor is suspended by information and knowledge has become the driving force of history today. They should manifest itself preoccupation with race, sexuality, and identity for the left all societies once in express with service values distributed evenly among men, women, white person, color, lesbian, and straight, with inspiration and is even more distributed. It removes the student information, representation, relation, production, interpersonal relation, to consumption, the logic of student capital, conclusion about the truth of ruling class practices, excluded localization, totalization that disregards difference in ruling classes, opposite to bias, and ideological alibi for race and class struggles. And class is a better starting point for challenging oppression. Intersecting inequality is real. Marxism is key to historicizing and redress collective appearance. If they read the first paragraph of the card in the 2AC, they are misreading the article. Taylor concludes that Marx is not reductionist and that it's a great starting point. It's Taylor in 11. Marxism been aligned as a blind to racism. For example, two whites accuses the class of reductionism, meaning Marxists think that class is more important than race. Whites also accuses of within islands missing in reality. People are called white, of course, presumes Marxists to all be white. What do Marxists actually say? Capitalism requires variance tools to divide the majority. Racism and all oppression and service. Racism developed initially justified in statement under capitalism, religion, slavery, pivot around which inequalities turned into blame racism. The product capitalism is denied importance of it. Explain its origin and production. It is popular to talk about oppression that's intersecting the wall and reinforce they are born out of the male relationist. About half of Marx did write about discovering the golden American establishment of the Aboriginal looting of the Indians and turning Africa into commercial hunting, signalized capitalist reductionist. Marx reductionists you may have missed slavery and capitalism incompatible. Simply waited for slavery to wither. Not only was Marx actually actively organized, but it theorized that slavery, discrimination were not just problems with the slave. Moreover, Marxist racism is the means by which workers had the common objective interests could also become enemies and subjective real racist ideals. That antagonism is artificially kept alive. It's the secret by which capitalism maintains power. Capitalism promotes competition to divide workers when one group of workers negatively impacts the entire class. And their history is wrong. At the very root of history, the need for slavery arose from the need for a more efficient labor force and more other cultures were trying to slave until Europeans settled the African workforce. Nation 1. After New World landowners found a plantation to exploit the Russian which were included profitable commodities in order to produce goods and cheap laborers provided at first the carbureting for using slaves. Insurance to be free packaged by uranium bound in the boy over a set number of years while the wait service were in 2 years was soon determined by the landowners that African slaves were the most suitable workers. Had a hard life between the 1/3 of slaves dying, creating a constant demand for them. And the alternative is dialectical materialism. Rejection of the app is key to a historical materialist criticism. Voting negative endorses an anti-capitalist methodology that denaturalizes the functions of capital. Stand 1 and 6. We need to apply the principle of historical totalizing, connecting the policies of Russian structure and production. Reproduction is the externally for any historical materialist critique and mechanically divorced from historically determined mode of production. The majority of these parts are modernized, creatures dying, free market object, homogenizing and centralizing, abolishing independent states, Argentinians without the US construction of crisis and capital accumulation only leads to short-circuiting transculturalism, the ideology translate transnationalism as involved in the discourse of war and terrorism. Contradiction and resolution consider the imperialist project aligning the crisis with unilateral globalism, historical imperialist retreat should seek the height of political economy to continue the neocolonial oppression of the rest of the world. And ending white supremacy is impossible without ending capitalism. Clarify root cause is necessary to resolve it. That's Cass Fishman in 14. We cannot resolve the problem unless there is a clear about its root cause. Americans are grounded with genocide, slavery, colonial occupation, self-labor, restored, combined with extreme exploitation, slavery, extraordinary profit for capital, can you produce the source of capital, accumulation of wealth, white supremacy, and systemic racism, were embedded in the law and ideologies of society, race from genocide, and slave system, attack on neighboring communities, execution, drug data, links to race, and racially exploitative, oppressive system, the very core of American class exploitation, state power, repression, ideological hegemony, social environmental, it's not impossible to resolve white supremacy, institutional racism, well, any capitalism we offer as a technological tool to critical path forward, and in notion of power as a discursive domination, mass class suppression, no freedom from exploitation is possible without overflowing capitalism. Zalber's 1995. Since power is diffused over access to power, one can empower oneself within the existence of relations and prevention. There is according to these, there is no need for revolution to be on different social relations, simply acquiring access to different matter. Domination of matter of the fact power itself is always produced by material forces. Power is supported by the ownership of the means production, persuasion itself, domestic economic acts, because proportionate economic relations, and steel, the domination of the habits of the work of theories, the ceiling and the cost of German domination represent power is not dominance, separated from the mutual person, solely produce power, the ownership of the means of production, the postal theories, the class economics, the objective law, of capital, the right of the description of the specific circumstances of unusual power to consume, and the name of the inclusive postal theories introduced into the analysis of racial contingency that any sense of social totality representation of a class of occupation makes a national and postal theories the issue of women's work as an economics question, market hard question, and now in the case. Actually, don't market hard question. The same is true about occupational inequalities, persons of color, localist descriptions, suppress subjective conditions of production that divide people.
So I guess my first question is on cap. A lot of your root cause evidence is in the context of how slavery began almost 300 years ago. Is capitalism still the root cause of racial oppression?
So a root cause can only happen once. It started, I guess.
No, but you're
it
saying
was the root cause and it still is the root cause. Yeah,
no, it's
Taylor's specific on how we have to start with class, the root cause argument.
So I guess my question is, even if capitalism influenced the formation of slavery over 250 years ago,
solving capitalism.
Why is capitalism today still a prerequisite for resolving racial?
Because the exploitation of the black body for capital reasons. That's specifically what Zalberzade talks about, and also
Wait, you mean a modern day example of this, or is it just slavery?
A modern, yeah, sure. Native Americans are pushed into reserves for capital reasons. Class is the starting point for this. When?
Yeah.
Nuclear testing on their lands.
How is that for capitalism?
It's for capital is not capital.
So it's just
benefit. It's for the benefit of the.
Okay. So.
I mean, there's businesses don't interact with
that's fine.
people. There's.
Okay. Well, all right. So are you a policymaker?
Am I a policymaker?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not advocating for a policy.
Or so I guess on framework, you said simulation good, role playing good. Are you role playing as a policymaker?
You're not. Isn't that the problem? That's the framework argument.
Are you? I'm not reading a counterplan.
We're not trying to be. We know we're not topical. Are you?
I'm not reading a counterplan.
So you think we should role play as policymakers?
Yeah, I mean that's what the framework argument specifically talks about.
So we should role play as policymakers.
Minutes and switch that debate reasons. Yeah.
Does that mean we should pretend to be part of the government?
I mean that's what the framework argument talks about. It's it's
right,
not
so
only pretending, but it's engagement in and allowing to confront the issue.
I want to talk about this competition theory first.
Sure.
What does it mean for words and vacuums to be links?
Yeah, so it's basically it's what you say has effects, sort of.
All right.
You have to defend the choices of individual parts of your 1AC instead of just claiming
if there's a word somewhere in our 1AC that links to something, that's a concrete link that we cannot.
I mean, yeah. I mean, you have to defend your representation. So that argument's talking about.
Right.
Competition theory.
Okay. So
competition theory
you say you say omission is pro-omission. Does that mean we need to predict every other?
No, but you completely don't take into account the overall reasons. That's
the first motion piece of evidence you read in the 1AC says that Uncle Toliver critiques property by refusing to behave as property. Why is that not an acknowledgement of capitalism?
Why is that not an acknowledgement of capitalism?
Yes.
Because your Uncle Toliver 1AC isn't with Uncle Toliver specifically, but then you read his narrative as a way to just break away. It's not an acknowledgement of all of the issues, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
So our 1AC needs to acknowledge every issue about capitalism?
So it's in order to be competitive, that's what the competition theory talks about. It's also a big argument for I'm assuming you're
why do we need to be competitive with the critique?
Well, you're going to come up here and try to make a permutation argument. The competition theory specifically talks about that you can't come up here because you don't have an advocacy statement or a plan and make that permutation argument. Like, you're just not even gonna commute because you're not advocating for it. You already did residency. Alright. Actually, on TV. Actually, I guess what's the status of it?
Okay, there's something.
7 seconds.
Alright, we have 750 for 746. I'm good. And I'm not that bad at math. Yeah, I'm gonna go. I'll go case, framework, competition theory thing, and cap.
What's the order on case?
It's just gonna be the first and second contention.
Okay.
And then I'll intersperse the third contention in framework. And there we go. Alright, ready?
So it's just 2 pages on case.
Yeah.
Everyone good?
Do you really expect them to win after they completely drop case? Because the ballot should affirm the best reform strategy of combating anti-blackness. We act as its best because we read the narrative of Uncle Toliver as a rupture of a debate space and a way to promote a discussion of how to effectively combat anti-blackness. Political debt, extend the Brown evidence. The history of domestic surveillance is inextricable from the history of slavery. Slave patrols and water posters led to the hyper visibility of the black body, which gives way to political debt. The radical exclusion of the black body from the political sphere. The affirmative vote means voting for the 180's presentation of the narrative of Uncle Toliver. That somewhat states his point in this debate. Uncle Toliver's refusal to comply with his master's demand is a radical and important rupture that breaks down the static and dominant notions of debate. Now in framework. The role of the ballot is that the team that wins the debate is the one that sets the best strategy for combating anti-blackness. They straight up conceded this on the case debate, which means that you should automatically default to our role of the ballot. In counter-interpretation, we should have a discussion of a topic rather than a topical discussion. Brown from the 1AC indicates that the prototype of domestic surveillance methods were started on the plantation, meaning that to understand how surveillance operates, we first need to have a discussion of blackness and group their definitions, and negative expects affirmatives to fit their cookie-cutter view of debate, and if not, they exclude them, locking in normative paradigms to perpetuate anti-black violence. This is the hallmark of intellectual elitism that entrenches state power that Markwick and 10 limits are imposed by people who have the most power to determine who counts as us and who counts as the other. Instead of removing domination, projecting code and open the secure to exercise power, the only authority that can determine legitimacy as the apparatus of the state. In the next model of simulation transcends an epistemic analysis of the government's colonialist legacy, resulting in detachment from the world. This DSRB-8. The debate requires that the participants take on the decision of the state actors to witness, students witness the argumentation beyond the walls of the academy. Expected as U.S. policy making cannot wish away the horrific atrocities perpetrated every day in our name, slipping by refusing to acknowledge these implications. The objective stance of policymakers and inability linked to normative and historical and contemporary practices of power that produce and maintain varied networks of oppression. And Martin and Sexton indicate that a political solution is doomed to fail. Reforms are just examples of trying to find space within civil society rather than striving for something beyond it, which destroys any chance of black life because it just allows a civil society to reconfigure itself as dominance. Also extend Dylan from the 1AC that the state has always been bad for the black body. There is no way they can win a reformism argument because any reform will inevitably be checked or circumvented to maintain the anti-black status quo, which turns any chance of a TVA. Extended Moten, even if they win that they can solve for some instances of anti-blackness, they also have to prove their TVA is a fugitive practice. This is an oxymoron because the concept of fugitivity is to work away from the state. At worst, it is a solvency deficit that the TVA does not resolve, and they're supposedly neutral philosophical question is a view from nowhere that cannot foster a discourse in which the U.S. is for the black body who removes the authority of white supremacy into CNT and 5. I I read out of the personal context and connected to my race body from place of life and embodied experience of velocity. The embodied self is deemed irrelevant in search of truth. The white philosopher presumes to speak for all of us without the slightest mention of race identity. Whiteness of authorship is a form of authority to speak from nowhere for everyone who is the power to yield self-negating. The black body's racial experience is fundamentally linked to the oppressive modalities of the race white body subjectivity is reduced to instantiations of a race of the white imaginary embedded with an actual ratio of give black people. And we don't take any ground away. They have a plethora of options to run against us, like knowledge reduction, cost and fragmentation. They could have critiqued our starting point like they actually did. We don't provide them with just a bunch of racism impact terms, but at the same time, it's not our responsibility to write their negative strategy. And their theoretical office and loss of power to maintain their privilege in the moral high ground that's still got 192. The stronger party uses simple habits and steals levels principle. The objective approach is accepted because their bodies, the stronger party balance themselves in opposition to the take more permission to themselves and be drawn into a place of predictable arguments about measurability, predictability, and the interpretation principle away from the weight of a stronger party is managed to inscribe their views and interest into institutional culture and hold the negative to a very high standard on the fairness debate. The one you see was 8 conceded minutes of why the status quo is always unfair for the black body, which is another reason the TVA can't solve. The next scrolling of dissent creates an atmosphere where the state can do what it wants, turns their theoretical office as Butler and for the dissent debate to depend on the inclusion of those who can maintain critical views of state policy to charge those with which critical views of treason, criticism, climate of freedom, mission, certain views of racial ban that exchange or dissent and dissent is equal to threatening if someone holds views that are not like that comes so that person comes to lack credibility as more closer to critique and views of public debate of debate and the democratic conversation itself, so the debate becomes the exchange of the views among the like-minded. The regulation of a sphere of appearance is one way to establish well count as reality our capacity to real and to apprehend hangs in the balance, and our limits are better. Let's be real, none of us are going to change things about the USFG by yelling about the USFG in a classroom, but we can tangibly change the norms of the debate space by voting for affirmative. This is a stance against unethical practices in the debate space, and framework limits our ability to create strategies of resistance and portray the USFG as the only actor that can solve while excluding any ways that we can create changes in this debate. Now on the Atlantis evidence, they say empathy, but this card doesn't actually have any words on empathy until the very last sentence, which means at worst you should not evaluate this argument even in the slightest. Now to decay. Actually, onto the computation theory thing. Extended Delgado evidence. The Delgado evidence is really good on the question of when you selectively enforce different modes of fairness, and that's completely bad because it's just a reflection of civil society. And all of these reasons they say that we shouldn't be able to get a perm, or that the word picks are legitimate, or that silence is actually or that negative links of omission is good. But that's just reason. But those are just theoretical reasons to prefer civil society over the affirmative. This is exactly this is exactly the kind of thing that the Delgado evidence that our role of the battle are critiquing, which means that you should not evaluate these kinds of arguments. Now to decay for real. First framework is a prior question that means if we win their method is unethical, then you should vote affirmative. Identifying the starting point as one that is rooted in anti-black violence based on the discourse and fortification of oppression and shouldn't be evaluated since it's based on community balance and permutation. Participate in fugitivity from capitalism. Uncle Toliver's Abhorrent Eruption is an example of an astonishing critique that civil society cannot possibly understand. This is a prerequisite to other styles of critiques. Instrumentalization is that capitalism is a tool used by civil society to subjugate the black body. Things like white flight and Donald Sterling's apartment scale is proven. If capitalism was a driver of slavery, Europeans would have just enslaved other Europeans. This would require less economic resources than civil society stigmas associate black people with evil. Disproves the thesis of decay, means only the absolved and analysis of racial structures as a prerequisite to an anti-capitalist revolution. That's Taylor in 11. Working class unity will never be achieved. Marxism has been aligned as ignorance of comedy, racism, reductionism, ignore the way that even middle class, affluent people, and color-based racism and color-based discrimination. There's little working class cautious in unity of perceptions because of racism and the way that white racism is deliberately inculcated among white working folk only by confronting that can be a build across racial class-based coalitions. And 6, capitalism is not the root cause. As Laramie and 10 logical areas of radical and critical commentary on capitalism. Some critics of the policy and conclude that yes, in our society we have a capitalist economy, therefore capitalism causes that solutions to be comprehensive. Also problematic and other systems, and usually more extreme form of the critical point is that some people not very social ills result from capitalism, but not on this basis this year actually do stop an alternative economic process to solve the problem. Identifies capitalism itself wasn't the cause of the problems in the first place. And voting affirmative affirms the creation of an entire body of knowledge that isn't included in evidence as a prerequisite to affirming any alternative existence that can strive toward freedom. And still in 13, as liberation moves in person or underground, a new body of knowledge immersion moves because that negated national narrative of progress, equality, justice, the prisoner, and the underground is responsibility for oppression, hundreds of factors to disappear. into a vast network of safe houses under the table job interpretation networks. The person access unique formation knowledge which led to alternative ways of seeing and avoiding the world underground organizations under certain cultures foundational to the production survival of alternatives to things the way as they were. And this way culture became a side believers in alternative forms of knowledge. And you should extend the gassy evidence, you should cross-apply the gassy evidence that I read in Prong Framework onto this piece of evidence because onto the CAPK because gassy evidence is particularly crucial because all of their authors just assume that Marxism is just going to be good in the abstract, but that just reifies whiteness. I'll do the rest of this analysis. My partner will do the rest of this analysis in the 1AR. But this argument is really gotten the question of how when you just describe white philosophical concepts onto the black body, it doesn't actually do anything. Ready?
What did you say about perm and stuff?
What?
The perm argument.
The term what?
At the top of the head, what did you say about that?
Okay, so the permutation, participate in fugitivity from capitalism. It's basically term to the act. Uncle Toliver's poetic eruption.
That's fine. So you talk about that that cap is not the root cause. Can you explain that?
What do you mean, like, I don't understand, like,
Your layered evidence?
polarity evidence?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I think it's relatively straightforward. You take AP Psych.
No, I mean, why can you explain that evidence? I don't care.
Okay. Well, it would have been a lot easier because my AP Psych teacher always tells me correlation does not equal causation.
Okay, I get that. This card like maybe has no warrants. Why is cap not?
I see X in our society. We have a capitalist economy. Therefore, capitalism causes X.
Yeah, it literally-
The solution
it
is to
makes
be
the-
comprehensive. Also been problematic in other systems.
Right, no, it makes the claim that like causation is not equal correlation, but it doesn't say why in this case that's not true. Especially when our evidence is very specific on this case, but that's fine. Taylor, like so you read the first part of the Taylor card. In my 1 and C, I read the other part of the Taylor card that says Marxism is a good way to combat.
Plus, that's just for.
Right, no, so I read that part. Why does your Taylor evidence, the first part of the card I read, apply here? If I read the second part of the card, I read 1 and 2.
Okay, cool. You read more of the card. It still says the same thing. First, analysis of racial structures is a prerequisite to an anti-cap revolution. What happened?
That's your tab. What does the card actually say? Because when I read it, it said Marxism. Like I read the card in 1 and 2. It says Marxism is a good way to combat racism.
And you let me talk.
So what are the warrants in that card?
Okay, can I talk?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, basically it says Marxism has been maligned as ignorant to combating racism. Marxism cannot actually effectively combat racism because when you get a bunch of work, because when you get a bunch
the card goes on. Okay, my question is, the card goes on to say that Marxism is a great way to combat racism. I did all that work in the 1 and 2. I read that card. Why isn't this Taylor card applied whatsoever? Like this is the rest. I read the rest of the card. I said in my tab that you're going to read this card because when I looked at your wiki, you have this card. It doesn't make any sense.
Congratulations.
Because Taylor. Okay, my question is, the rest of the Taylor card concludes Ned with the capitalism argument.
No, actually, the Taylor evidence has another one that you haven't still accounted for. It specifically says there is not any working class consciousness and unity because of race. So
Okay. That's fine. What are you perming? If your method is reading the 1AC and that's already done, what are you perming?
Like I said, it's termed through the app. Where if you want, it's more of a no link argument. If you really, it's a glorified no link argument. If you really want to look at it that way, I mean.
Okay, that's fine.
We
So your
don't
framework is whoever best combats violence, right?
Yeah.
So can that be through whatever method best does it?
What?
Like whatever method best does it?
What do you mean?
Like
No, what specifically our interpretation is that you don't actually go out and perform your alternative. You don't try to be a Marxist. You don't try to do anything. You're not down with people who are actually poor. You're just a white middle class kid who just tries to be.
the assumption.
But the affirmative, but what the affirmative actually does.
You can make that claim. That's fine. The process is fine.
Okay.
Nice. Starting prep.
Oh, let me close it.
ask you, what was that? Yeah, you got okay.
Sorry, I'm still thinking.
It just got.
Oh,
I'm what?
like,
This time,
Is it gonna be a change on the speech log?
No, I mean,
Oh, yeah. I don't feel like it's.
No. Maybe that one Tammy can.
Mars Tennessee?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't open on the second log.
Alright. Is everyone ready?
No, I didn't open on the, I'm sorry.
Alright, you good?
So,
Alright, everyone ready?
Marxist has two fundamental claims. Are you actually the source side of the claim you're making? Are you on the right side of the claim? There's one social construction and it's capitalism. We engage with the racist institution insofar so we can profit further. This is foundation for board to bracket off, which is not bringing capital and exploit. What it does, materialist strategy is keep analyzing the dialectic between capital, what it exploits to reveal the real culprit and stab the hydra in the heart. The impact is class exploitation, domination that's legitimized by means of production. We reorient how we analyze history by looking through at the modes of production, how it's placed, mutual position, alienation, subjugation, the alternative of historical materialism, the only thing that acts as a universal causality, struggles of people, a classic universal connection between all forms of consciousness, and the role about is to methodologically and performatively deconstruct capitalism. Any reason that they don't mean that the ballot automatically goes neg, because one, if there's any reason that the case turns the case as an offense, reason to vote neg, two, there's epistemology is not inclusive of the root cause of the oppression, which is a capitalist social relation. Any reason they don't include this cause means there's any form of education not good enough to change the debate as an activity. And three, the impact of the extinction outweighs other impacts. We solve through this historical materialism. And four, the alternatives to affirm a method of historical materialism means that we analyze history behind why structures of oppression are the way we are by engaging it, so we historicize the way the oppression function, how it works, the implication of the affirm are caused by capitalist social relations. The only way to solve this is through examining the way complicit and perpetuate system of oppression. And if there's any chance that we win the root causes debate, that means we have the better method, because historical materialism is going to be the only way in which you are able to solve all modes of oppression. We are the better methods in solving this. And that we are not just solving anti-blacks, but a lot more. And also, the affirmative does not depend on stable plan text of any action or process test. That means that 1AC must be understood as stable, super, and complete political statement. It's not a framework. This is a model of competition necessary for debate. There are three implications of the function of the test to their interpretation, and we end. And on the links, we have a read 13 of it saying how the attempt to marginalize blackness sanitizing the neoliberal order, which talks about how the focus on black culture class will derate the larger political economy of race. And this is a place of politics challenging the social structure that reproduces inequality. And they also talk about how race is at the bottom of the problems. The key to the problems is capital, because this is what is causing the neoliberal order. And then we also have our Zabrzadi 94 evidence says how the focus on race is an ally for class struggle. I'll talk about it gives an example of what this class struggle is about. Talk about how capitalism is the root cause of labor consumption, and how it manifests itself in race, sexuality, and preoccupation. We are the reason for why this class struggle, capitalism is the reason why this class struggle is happening. Is causing the oppression that the blackness and the app is doing, which means they are not a better method for us. Then we have our Taylor 11 evidence, which I need to clarify again how it talks about how using the Marxist theory is actually the better way. You cannot let their card vote for him, because that's that clear implicit lines stated just like that. And so you need to look at our table of evidence, not include theirs, saying how the class is a starting point, how unjustly impaired because racism was developed to justify slavery, and how it pivoted around equality, how capitalism promoted this competition.
And then we have our Nash 1 evidence, which talks about how their history is wrong because we have the root cause, because we were able to overcome the structure of how this actually of what is actually happening, because the history will actually prevail. Let's sit down, because I have a little history lesson we're going to talk about. Go all the way back to when Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and he came over to invade the Indians, and his whole reason for doing this was to exploit them, to gain as much gold as possible. This was one of the sole reasons where capitalists started, because they wanted to make the most money possible. The Spanish wanted to gain this, and then you can just look at America. You can look at the blacks not even being treated as well. They're using capitalism to farm on these cotton farms, free labor, and abusing them to make the most money possible. Because we always know the South was one who wanted to make the most money possible. They're the farming. They're always supporting just, and they never wanted to abolish it. I mean, we win root cause specifically in the context of American jail, because in capitalism root cause is what perpetuating this black and perpetuating the slavery that the affirmative is arguing about. Now on the perms. They don't get a permutation without a stable accuracy statement for change. The affirmative could be consistent with any alternative. They have to win 0% risk of a link to get out of this methodology or permutation. There are reasons to reject the wanting to position itself as an inflexible solution. The permutation deviates from that now, so we are competing methodology for relating to their externalization fundamentally inconsistent with one. Fairness. No plain text means there's no standard for competition. They can't and they can't permit anything, making being negative impossible. Also creates an incentive for everyone to read really big accuracy that can permit everything, which ensures the argument responsibly benefit debates, which means that we can only talk about factions, useless method, have no productive clash into education. Comparative method is the only way to have a productive discussion about resistance strategy, model debate, choice-based transformative potential, and also the neoliberal debate, the assumption that we can simply choose the most net beneficial. Burps. Option, but no the alternative. Present methodological accountability. They assume the position neoliberal subject, which employs cost-benefit analysis, replicate integration, liberal populism, ham 9. But then neoliberal, the social country is judged as the effective source of homo, and company is constructed rational, calculating entrepreneurship, political and social economic power reasoning, political system, unprecedented capacity of the model, neoliberal strategy among the socio-political options, not the author organization, the body, developing seats of the body, but rather group of individual entrepreneur aims to maximization of the economy through rational deliberation of cost and benefit of neoliberal subject. And also, we need to gain net ground at ways, because debate is only valuable as the skills we gain. They destroy the burden of the breach order, which are preconditioned to class internally to any benefits of the interpret their offensive side. They drastically increase possible occurrence. So if there's any way possible occurrence, you cannot consider reducing net ground. The way he sets a stable limit for competition, but that they have decided which solve their offensive infinite threat in 2A or away block for so it means you should error net plus after research on the so to make information in a broader thinker and functions as a tiebreaker and. Sorry, going back to the firm. Oppressive social relations must be addressed collectively. Exclusion politics of the affirmative must define acceptable levels of participation based on in-group and due to failure bound out test. They asserted the political movement, separate black power, radical lesbian feminists, yielded deep concern with isolated, been declared only one feminists, only black people can work against, but the states only have experienced injustice and concern, and that's the fact that we clean upon essential theory, assume the possible and the restricted one for the relevant, and see the traits of being black people, these separate tendencies, and repatriate the individual fallacy that oppressive social relations can be reformed by the virtual subject broader agreement, other together, our relation within the injustices are embedded, and then we have our San Juan evidence, which is something about the alternative dialectical material. I kind of explained before, we're going back into history to see what the root cause is. To start as a start of discussion to break down capitalism. This is going to be a start of it. So we are not completely solving, but it's a start of discussion that actually happened, and this is going to be a key to solving, because like I said before, we are the root cause, and they never even really contested our alternative, which means that we have complete solvency. The only thing they have to gain is the root cause. Whether we have the root cause or not, you do not let them come on the one air and talk about the alternative. And then we have Cass Fisherman enforcing any white supremacy is impossible without any capitalism, because the white will always, the white people, especially in Congress, they always be perpetuating these black people. We need to end capitalism to stop what is happening. Then we have Reserve 95, which is the thing saying how capitalism controls the economy and the focus on race creates this class struggle, which causes the oppression that is happening.
Alright, ready?
Yep. Perfect. What happened to dialectical materialism? I mean, you were calling it dialectical materialism, and now you're calling it historical materialism. So, I want to know if it's just... Okay, yeah, well, Let's talk about the Haman evidence now. I mean, it says net benefit analysis is bad. Why aren't you doing the exact same thing? Or what does Haman evidence that say? Yeah, first.
Which one, the Haman?
Yeah, Haman.
Okay, so it is basically saying that like within the neoliberal order, like the effects of like the homo encomias is like constructed as like a rational and calculating like entrepreneur.
So why don't you do the exact same thing?
Because we just don't. It's just not.
You
what
just don't.
happens.
So unwarranted claim. Let's talk about the bomb evidence that you make on the perm. You say exclusion leads to failure. Who do we exclude?
Could you exclude the rest that are being oppressed within society?
The rest that how?
Because you're only focusing on anti-blackness, and anti-blackness are not the only ones that are being oppressed within society. There's
Okay. Cool.
We're not saying anything to solve all oppression, but attacking capitalism is the best method.
Sounds good. I don't know. You said you were gonna go on framework. What did I don't did you-
Sorry. Framework of the K framework.
Oh, my bad.
Yes.
Awkward. So you just spent all that time on that? Okay, cool. Andrew, other questions?
Yes. Why can we not get a term if we win that the method is not competitive, even if like no.
Okay, because you don't. The basic idea is you don't have an advocacy
Yeah.
statement.
So why is that mutually exclusive with historical materialism?
Because that's the advocacy
Why
statement.
though? Like, why can I? Why can
Why
we not,
is dialectical
why can we
materialism
not
the
exercise
advocacy
the
statement?
need to challenge anti-blackness and like
Because we have a specific plan on what we're
really?
doing.
So what's like the alt text then?
The whole text is
Alt-
dialectical materialism.
Okay, it's 2 words. Okay.
There's no like plan text for the
What's wrong with 2 words?
Oh, I guess like
Dialectical
what is a
materialism.
permutation?
What?
What is a permutation?
You need a permutation, right?
What
It's
is a
like
permutation?
just define a permutation.
Okay, so a permutation is the test of 2 advocacy statements.
Why? Okay, that's fine.
This is actually. Yeah, the Taylor evidence is just gonna. Yeah, no, we're not gonna talk about the Taylor evidence. Actually, I wanted to talk about the. You sure you don't have any more questions, Andrew?
Yeah, you said extinction outweighs. Do you ever make an extinction claim?
No, sorry, I didn't mean to say that.
Okay,
My
that's,
question.
yeah, awkward. Let's talk about the argument. You say we need to win 0% of a link to win the perm.
Yeah,
We
because
already
the link is a
explained-
disadd to the.
We already said the perm is basically a glorified no link term. Why do you still get to leverage all of this offense against the perm?
It's just because the link is a disadd to a perm. You have to win no link to be able to effectively state that you can do both.
Yeah, 227.
Can you tell me what your internalization is?
The instrumentalization is that? Let me find it.
It just says like capitalism is the tool of civil society.
Yeah.
With just, like,
So like anti-block. Yeah.
Okay.
How much credit did you use?
I'm at 237. Just call it an hour. It'll be a framework, like actual framework. And then, framework, a little more framework on the K.
Oh my
More
Alright.
answers.
god.
It's stuff at the top of the K.
So,
And then,
framework.
and then line by line K proper.
So framework proper, K framework, line by line on the K.
Alright. Oops. So go about it.
Oh yeah, my bad.
Good.
Push up on your gun.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Well,
Okay, is anyone not ready?
yeah.
You're not ready?
Well, I'm ready.
Yeah, we're good.
My bad.
First, the one I see on the framework, the one I see was an impact on the framework. There's no unique offense coming out of the framework debate, meaning we'll consider state as bad and then go to K. On the K, prefer a rule of ballot is the most inclusive of all people and is the best way to break down capitalism and solve for anti-blackness. They don't, if you're under the rule of ballot, is the best method to counter anti-blackness, is the best method to counter capitalism because capitalism is the root cause of anti-blackness. Is the best way to, the best method to transcend capitalism is the best method. Who has to vote for this debate because it's the most inclusive and solves for their impacts. They say at the top that the app solves, but because they don't contest our alternative and because capitalism is the root cause to anti-blackness, you have to go under our rule of the ballot because it contests who transcends capitalism best, and that's the root cause of anti-blackness. It includes most people. And then they also did on the line, you read the layer because it says cap is not the root cause, and literally all the card says is that causation is not equal correlation in general context. It just says like capitalism doesn't mean this, but it has absolutely no points. But ask them about it in context, they have absolutely no points. Why? That's why you have to conclude that capitalism is the root cause. Dylan did a ton of work on capitalism is the root cause. You can see like economic exploitation that's specifically talked about in the Nash card from when I see in the Nash card from when I see talked about exploitation of the black body and of the oppressed people for economic reasons. And then the Taylor card is a huge issue in this case. They try to read the Taylor card. They tried to treat the Taylor card in their 2AC blocks, but Taylor concludes that Marxism is a good idea. I will read you lines from the Taylor card right now. Taylor specifically says that capitalism requires various tools to divide the majority of racism and all oppression service. Racism was developed initially to justify enslavement, and then further on goes, Marx did write about the discovery of gold in America and entombment of the original looting of the East Indies, turning Africa into commercial hunting, signalized capitalist production. The beginning of the card literally critiques the argument that capitalism would work, and the card that goes on to say that capitalism would be a great idea. This is coupled with the alternative of historical materialism that they don't address whatsoever. Historical materialism is the best way to solve for anti-blackness and solve for the affirmative because it works within, because it's able to take a step back, take a look at how this intersectionality actually came to be and how that actually happened. Their only answer to this is the Yancey card. They say that historical materialism is whiteness and it replicates a system of whiteness, but it's the best way to solve it because they can't critique our actual method. That method is, the historical materialism method is key to actually transcending capitalism and solving for anti-blackness and helping the most amount of people under the best world development state. That's where you have to go. That's where you have to go on the alternative. They also have this. Industrial internalization disad, you can't take into account this is just another white argument that coupled with the Yancey card. This if solving capitalism solves for that issue through historical materialism, which they did no work on answering, then their answer is that whiteness is bad, even though they don't answer the solvency of possibly, even though like historical materialism isn't whiteness, it doesn't apply at all. They also read the Delgado card and the Delgado card on the flow and try to cross-apply it with this whiteness argument. But this whiteness argument doesn't apply whatsoever because historical materialism is a way that we can access the breaking down and transcending of capitalism in the only way that can actually happen. And essentialization is key. The Ash refusal to recognize the total analytic system prevents strategies that accept exploitation as a concrete reality. The app acts as a diversion of Sauer's 1995. Class is not another reference, but the central force in history is index and social antagonism in the individual form of class only insofar as they have to carry on a common battle against another class. Otherwise, they're on hostile terms with each other as competitive. The subsuming of individuals under the class brings them with their subjection to all kinds of ideas, changes that the theory regards with the radical structure, change their superstructural and not changes in the material base. These represents complications and how the social relations and production do what they always have done under capitalism and force the social division of labor at strike. The continued practice of exploitation itself. And the alt frames your ballot regardless of alternative solvency. You have an ethical obligation to attempt to transcend capitalism. Utopian thinking is key to the value of life. That's the role of the ballot. Its methodology and epistemology challenge to transcend capitalism in March 95. We have discovered that capitalism is a profoundly irrational, systemically and morally a domination that is a free and fully internationally tendency to repress human beings and turn them into autopositivism and scientism becomes ideology defining imagination in circle forms that favor dominating classes or bureaucratic release. The question is the rationality of utopian thinking, the denial of utopian mutilation, freedom and reason, ethnic ethical communities as a utopian is not something same back and predicting options time to think something else should never saw that we can live within imagination exists to get over capitalism as a social equivalent of drug and such ethical renunciation as is death or mutilation that the utopian is living death, the thing of it is managed to free yourselves from a system that science and technology exert over our mind and imagination. And that their only answer on the alternative was in cross-sex, basically saying that alternative, we won't do it because we're white and we just won't do our alternative, we don't access in the system. Do not buy this argument whatsoever. Like that's just a complete claim about like what Dylan and I will have outside this room. The alternative, since they do not counter, is the best way to solve. You have to go to you have to look at the alternatives since they did counter in the root cause argument. But since their root cause evidence, their layer of the evidence is really bad. You have to go into our framework because it helps the most amount of people.
How much prep do we have left?
We have
746.
Right.
Blackness or method?
Excuse me?
Blackness or method?
That's a good job. Yeah, the first contention, second contention,
Okay.
then we'll use the third contention.
Got it.
Actually, there'll be a few like cross applications from framework, but you're already on the path. And this is gonna be a short overview in case. Alright. Extend the ground evidence best explained started with like a security system of vulnerability and enslavement resist these tools of oppression, impose a hypervisibility on the black body, to be excluded from political politics and civil society and apply the social sphere on the global narrative of a destructive slave act, a slave's act of defiance, fugitivity against civil society and its story of freedom that is unintelligible to have blackness motion. Evidence says the damn color narrative is a face of unknowability that reason space for black political life to be claimed in need. The narrative is not about pain but about the creation of agency. The narrative is a method to which anti-blackness can be challenged. If you prove that, that given the best challenge anti-blackness then affirmative as a result, and they have conceded, obviously they have conceded framework will cross-apply, but about evidence to the framework on cap, actually, and I guess the competition theory too. The negative theoretical reasons for the oral instruments of civil society don't be isolated from criticism that you must predict the theoretical reason to win the debate or reject the refutation because they all perpetuate society's anti-blackness. They're still saying that we need to have a plan. They're still saying that we should defend the state, and also I'll do that work on the perm stuff. And also, classify the Yancey evidence to the capitalism. So the negative authors are white. You cannot theorize the black body. Yancey says that it's from a neutral position is speaking on the position of whiteness, which is a form of authority gives more power to white authors. This term is decapitated because it only sustains notions regarding anti-blackness that have been formulated by philosophers like Marx that have been white philosophers that exclude black knowledge. Now on to that. First, on the top, they say that they need to performatively deconstruct capitalism. However, they have no performance. In Antelope County, Virginia, the slave known as Uncle Toliver had been indiscreet enough to play after the Yankees. The Massachusetts judge ordered him to kneel the bar and break the Confederacy, but the stubborn old man prayed even louder for Yankee triumph. With growing exasperation, perhaps he broke the two sons of turns whipping him until finally the slaves, still murmuring something about the Yankees, collapsed and died. We have performatively challenged anti-blackness via negative as immigrants. We both agree that we should perform. We're the only ones who would perform. Therefore, you can reject the alternative on site. Also, you classify the first piece of Moten evidence in the second condition here. Uncle Toliver was considered property under law, and he divided his masters. He did not have his property. He reclaimed his agency. He challenged capitalism by refusing to be property. He did not let capitalism or racism oppression. The affirmative way of challenging capitalism. He performed that. They have not. It's something rule about the judge is an ethical evaluator who should choose the best performative method for combating anti-blackness. And they also say that you don't get a perm, however, perms don't require plans. They're just a question of what the alt and you have to go. If we went to the alt and the after not mutually exclusive, if we went to the thesis, the affirmative, the thesis of the alternative is not mutually exclusive, then obviously we can get a perm extend perm to the alt here. Or sorry, perm to the app here. They have no unique reason, or they have no reason why the affirmative uniquely increases capitalism. They only say that it's the root cause. However, they also say like the Taylor evidence here. It doesn't matter which way the Taylor evidence goes. Either way, it just says that that fugitive politics and the critique of capitalism are not mutually exclusive. We can be fugitives in capitalism. There's no reason why we can't do both. There's no reason the problem doesn't solve. Root cause is not a link. They have no link. Yeah, they also say a black focus distracts from capitalism. However, even if capitalism, actually, I guess there's a meta-level framing argument on the root cause arguments. They say capitalism causes slavery. However, there's no reason why capitalism now sustains racism and sustains anti-blackness. Even if that root cause argument was true 150 years ago, then there's no reason why right now capitalism uniquely prevents the cross the affirmative. Yeah. Wait, what? No, that's fine. Next they say Taylor goes nay. However, all this means once again the ultimate means the criticism of youth with each other. There's nothing about the app that uniquely affects capitalism. There's zero link 10. Actually already did that. And the link evidence just makes more root cause things. It says capitalist related race. It doesn't say focus on race is bad. And they also say that social relations need to be addressed collectively. However, this is in the context of identity politics, and the affirmative is not a form of identity politics. Neither my partner and I are black, and we are about political death, which means wait, let's actually skip that. classify the 1AC section evidence. Anti-blackness is completely relatable to every other form of oppression, which means the affirmative is an effective starting point for understanding other forms of oppression. We are an inclusive movement. Other people can't join us in a movement. Obviously, we think anti-blackness is bad, but that doesn't mean other oppressed groups should not also experience equality.
Instrumentalization.
Yeah. On the cap, extended instrumentalization just that capitalism is just an instrument of racism. How people be benefited from capitalism make money. An instrument that allows them to do whatever they want. The ethic that these people acted under is the ethic of civil society. White people were the ones to get to. We were the first ones to get into suburbs, while keeping black and brown people shoved away in the streets. And they also say the rule about they say capitalism more inclusive. Once again, already Blue's work, Section 10 says capitalism is a good starting point for understanding oppression. They say it's just sort of materials and the African have a performance. It doesn't.
237.
I don't really judge. I'm glad I got to be your last debate. Jeremiah and I went to the game. Oh, right, yeah.
It's freaking cold.
Yeah. Do you mind just we wait for my sophomores to get back? I'm trying to have them flow more debates. Or I mean, we have a video anyways. It's fine. Never mind.
Okay.
Not bad.
So are we waiting?
Nah. Go ahead.
Okay, so it's gonna be Marxism K, roll the ballot at the top. And I might crossplay some so they said in case you want to. Okay.
Okay, so K case.
No.
Is it just going to be the K or?
Yeah, and then cross-playing some of the stuff under
Okay.
on the case.
Okay.
Okay.
Wait. Hold up.
I see a silhouette, and he's coming this way. I think it's Michael.
You're starting on a roll of ballot?
Yeah.
Come on, sit down.
Alright, everyone ready?
The role of ballots methodologically and formally deconstruct capitals and meters it means that the ballot automatically votes for negative. Talk about this a lot, and they need to really extend because if there's any reason the case turns case, there's offense voting into the epistemology not inclusive the root cause of the pressure which is capitalist social relation. Any reason they don't include capitalism means that there is for education not good enough to change the base activity, and for it is the impact of class struggle that they will not be addressing. Also, our suffers are 94. I'm going to get to more of that later, and for because the alternative to affirm his historical material. This is key within it because they have their role about saying the starting point is starting with blackness. So the role about cannot be with that because if we will have any chance of winning the root cause, because they did not do a sufficient amount of explanation on the root cause in the 1AR. So I'm gonna start to do that here, and I'm gonna just almost be repeating my stuff because it's almost self-explanatory. We're gonna talk about it because all you this states all the way back. You can just look at Columbus and how he for profit you want to get gold from the indigenous people, and he killed them and he raped them. He had him. The other one was executed just to gain gold. He spread diseases because of the capitalist motives that he had. There was and then this continued all the way to slavery because they started the slave trade because they wanted some free labor. They know they could exploit the black people. They can exploit them and use them. And they could use them free without having to actually pay them. And so that's what started. And so capitalism promotes the anti-blacks is what is happening right now. Is promoting the oppression that the 1AC is completely talking about because we need to completely deconstruct capitalism. And one thing they say is that Oliver was challenging capitalism. The one he did not deconstruct capitalism, which means not unique to what we were trying to advocate. And so all he was trying to do was challenge it by not working. By just challenging not working, it doesn't mean that he was trying to completely deconstruct capitalism as a whole. So yes, we'll get that challenge, but it does not mean that he completely deconstructed it. And at the way the 1AC does nothing to break it down. So you don't need to vote.
Explain my alt songs now.
I will. So you need to vote. You need to vote neg on this, and also we have our ton of historical materialism. Again, they did not really fully address the term of historical materialism. One thing that actually universal causality is struggle of all people, because class universal connection between all forms of connection. We're going to go back in history, see what the root cause of this oppression was, and we're gonna find that it was caused because of the root cause that we have gained. What this is going to mean is going to be a starting point for us to break down capitalism, a starting point for us to discuss and have break down capitalism from here to stop the oppression for anti-black and everyone else that is being oppressed, because anti-black is because black people are not the only ones being oppressed. You can let all other races, Chinese, the Mexicans, the poor, they are being oppressed in society, being singled out for what is happening. So on the perm, again, they do not even get a permutation because without a stable advocacy statement for change affirmative, it could be considered any alternative. They have 0%. They have to win 0% of risk link to get out of 10. The methodology permutation or reason to reject the 1C position itself as an inflexible solution. Permutation deviates that analysis. We are convenient methodology related to their excellence and fundamentally inconsistent with N1 because fairness to no plan thing, no standard to for her competition. They compare anything, making being negative impossible. It's craziness for everyone to read just vague advocacy. You also got education, comparing methods. The only way to produce discussion about resistance strategies and model destroys the debate and transfer and their purpose only advocating capitalism because capitalism is still going to exist out there, so they cannot even fundamentally just because they do not have the advocacy statement, which is the negative have does have. You can just look at our evidence talking about how our San Juan evidence talking about how we need to have the dialectical material. That is our advocacy statement. They do not have this.
Extends our slide right now. You go to the alternative and why that's different.
You need to look at Zarbazar 94, how it talks about the focus on race and ally is key for class struggle because it'll obscure cows and talks about some of the key reasons are labor consumption, and how it manifests itself in race and sexuality and perpetuates the castlement and the oppression that is coming. So just focusing on race will not be key. Then we have our other Zarbazar 95, and which was mentioned at the end of the one that's talking about the notion power is discursive from class is already because that talks about capitalism controls the economy.
Explain the process of historical mechanism. 20 seconds left. How does historical mechanism work? Explain it.
I did. And the focus on race creates, and the focus on this creates class struggle. So the links you cannot let them have as elements are reading because the narrative they talk about the narrative of black here denotes that black people always engage in neoliberal hegemony that they choose to criticize because the discourse of slavery is merely fed for the economy because it trades off with the discussion of changing inequality affects one the black individual. So if we have any chance of winning the root cause that they have lack of an explanation on, you vote negative.
313.
Does anyone have time, Glenn?
220.
220, perfect, thank you. Where a water fountain is near here because I really need water.
No, sorry.
Here. This is mine. Just take a waterfall from it.
Yes.
Actually, you can just take the whole thing. I don't need it.
Sure.
in the order of framework and line by line, I guess. There's a distinction between the two. Everyone ready? Perfect.
You should extend the Brown evidence. The Brown evidence is going to be the framing issue in this debate because it specifically indicates how many of the methods of domestic surveillance were started on the plantation. For example, slave roasters and water patrols were both started on plantation that directly led to things like the FBI's most wanted list and COINTELPRO style taxes. These led to the hypervisibility and the political death of a black body, which the political death of a black body is the radical exclusion of the black people from the political sphere. In other words, black people are unable to actually get their voices up to the unable to get their voices up in any political sphere. This is an impact that has gone cold conceded throughout the debate. You should not evaluate anything that they have said. Instead, you should give our impacts 100%. You should give our impacts 100% probability, time frame, magnitude, whatever. We get 100% of our impact. Now we also get 100% solvency for the narrative of Uncle Toliver, because the narrative of Uncle Toliver is a really good way to actually rupture the different norms of debate and specifically rupture the different norms of capitalism, because the only thing that the affirmative the only thing that the negative has done is just say, our alternative is dialectical materialism, but they have not done anything outside of that. We performed the narrative of Uncle Toliver we performed the presentation of the narrative of Uncle Toliver. We introduced the narrative of Uncle Toliver into the debate space because we specifically, and that is good for capitalism because it's a rupture, and the whole narrative of Uncle Toliver is a rupture against things like capitalism because it's as per the 1AC Moten evidence, it's a critique of property against property. It's a critique of a piece of property against the concept of property, which is going to be particularly crucial on the K debate. Speaking of the devil now, the K debate. On framework, there's only one framework you should actually see. There's only one role the judge that you should actually see to, and that is if you think the alternative, and that is you should vote for the, you should vote for the most ethical. You should vote for the most ethical. You should vote for the most ethical method to challenge anti-blackness performed within the debate space, and that has to go to the affirmative because basically what that all boils down to is if I prove that even 1% racist, then you should vote affirmative on. Then you should be voting affirmative on site. Now I'll go on to their role of the ballot. I'll go on to our role of the ballot. They have straight up conceded it throughout the debate. That was part of the Moten and Hardy. That was part of the Moten and Hardy evidence that has gone conceded throughout the debate, which means that we should get 100% of this solvency. And now I'll also get on to the on the framework arguments that I got it. On the framework arguments that they made, they say we have a couple of disses against this. First is that they don't actually have a performance. They only, like I said already, the only thing that they said is dialectical. Our alternative is dialectical materialism. That is not a performance even in the slightest. That is not putting yourself on the line. That is nothing. We are putting ourselves on the line by putting ourselves at the edge of a loss. We are actively putting ourselves because we know we didn't have an advocacy statement. We know all of these things, and we know the teams would run these kinds of arguments against us. Yeah, we did it anyway. Anyway, also their Delgado, you should extend our Delgado evidence. Our Delgado evidence is really good on the question of our Delgado evidence is really good on the question of how their framework is totally racist and how they're talking about the norms like framework and like fairness in education, but they are enforced very arbitrarily. For example, to benefit civil society. For example, when it's totally okay when they get to not allow us to actually read a permutation, but when they want to read this kind of literature, then it's all okay because their interpretation on the framework law, I don't know if you remember, was the debate should be between a competitive the debate should be between the affirmative reading a hypothetical policy option against a competitive policy option. This is just arbitrary enforcement of the standard of fairness, which means that they should absolutely lose on this. Now give me this. On the root cause, debate. Even if capitalism caused racism over 200 years ago, there are zero warrants and analysis as to why capitalism now prevents movements like the from challenging racism. This was in the 1AR and in the 2AR and 2NR. And conceded in the 2NR. Yes, the 1AR may have less ink on the flow on the root cause debate, but the one answer, the 1AR has been conceded. Even if capitalism is able to explain slavery, then they shouldn't. It can't explain all of race in general. Yeah, the alternative is that they are able to explain slavery, but yeah, of course, if we are able to hop in our time machine, ask Darren Wilson if he shot Trayvon Martin because he was a good football player, then ask the cops that lit that guy up in Chicago that if they shot him because he looked like a bum. This is absolutely an asinine argument to make. You should extend the instrumentalization argument as a diss ad because it specifically indicates how many of the methods of anti-blackness, how many of the methods of capitalism are just tools of anti-blackness.
Debate.
Dan,
Yeah.
mind if we take a second?
That's fine.
Cool.
Yeah.
Actually, do you need cards, Dan?
I don't think so.
I'll wait here for a second.
Yes, the.
Are you good on cards?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. If you do need anything.
Okay. So, awesome debate, guys. At the end of the day, I voted affirmative. I think the reasons I do are first off, this piece of Brown evidence about hypervisibility that is extended by the affirmative throughout the entire debate. I think this is the best explanation of their argument on the root cause debate about how even if capitalism, the reason why institutions like slavery first existed, the fact is that capitalism today cannot explain the totality of anti-black racism. I think hypervisibility is a unique aspect of I think the affirmative. They make the argument that anti-blackness has marked the black body, made it hypervisible to things like policing, right? I think this is more like this is the best analysis as to how oppression actually is operated right now in the status quo. I don't think this is an answer you guys respond to. I think that the app probably doesn't get the permutation, but I think there's a couple of reasons why I think the affirmative probably even if I don't grant them the perm, probably wins the sort of methodology debate, right? I think their analysis on the Toliver, on the Uncle Toliver narrative is really good. There's not really a reason why. There's not really a reason why the sort of rejection of poverty relations that they say it has, why that isn't why that wouldn't be a stance against capitalism. Your answer in the 2NR is something to the extent like he wasn't able to deconstruct capitalism even if he challenged it. I don't think that's I think that's defensive. I don't think I don't think it's particularly responsive, right? Especially in a world where we're talking about who performatively like resist these systems of oppression. I think the narrative is sort of net better at doing that. I buy the affirmative's argumentation that like in terms of like actual performatively, discursively rejecting things, I think the affirmative is the only team that's really doing that. There's not really a comparable like speech act on the part of the negative that like compares to the sort of work that the Toliver narrative is doing. I think let's see, I got some stuff. Okay, so the Taylor evidence does conclude that a class focus only, a focus on class only is a bad kind of reductionist Marxism, right? The Taylor evidence is probably arguing for some sort of intersectional criticism, right? And I think the only intersectional criticism in this debate that accesses this piece of hyper visibility offense is the affirmative. Yeah. Oh, and they also extend this piece of evidence about how like racism is like, or that Taylor evidence also makes the claim that like racism amongst the working class is like one of the tools that prevents the formation of like broad class-based solidarity, right? So I think that challenging that and hypervisibility in the way that black bodies are dealt with and identified is probably a prerequisite to class struggle.
I guess like they have like applying Brown card like in contextualization against the root cause arguments we're making. Like I think they did that. Like on the flow of decay, like I didn't get a lot of interest in the root cause arguments or something like extending Brown very generally.
I mean, Brown is a concrete example of like instances of racism that can't be explained by economic relations, right?
Okay.
Like the hypervisibility of the black body can't be explained simply by like the distributive dialectical analysis of like their class position, right? Sorry, did that make sense?
No, yeah.
You haven't seen anybody specific stuff I know you want to talk about.
Yeah. What do you think about the strat?
I thought the strat was pretty good. I think if so I definitely think that you guys are winning that the affirmative shouldn't get to advocate the permutation. It's just a question of which methodology actually like best solves the role of the ballot or like best achieves the role of the ballot.
Okay.
I think that answering hypervisibility and explaining that like the reason the black body is marked is because it was expedient for capital to like create populations that could be like easily identified as not having or something like that.
Right.
I think that would probably be a good way to answer that, and I think that would probably make it a lot easier for me to vote negative.
Gotcha. Can I ask,
Yeah.
what offensive reason was there to prefer their role in the ballot as opposed to ours?
Hypervisibility. It's the only one that accesses it.
Gotcha. How could the block have been split better, do you think?
I don't know if there was anything like especially wrong with the way the block was split. I would like maybe collapse down to smaller parts, like have like sort of just a more distinct separation. It's just like I'm going to take the permutation and the root cause debate, and, like I'm going to take the debate, something like that. I mean,
Yeah,
like,
because this is their first time, like, really
for sure.
going, like, one
Yeah,
off.
I mean, like, yeah, I think, like, the way they split the block was fine. Like, it could have been, like, more distinct. Like, it could have been, like, more, like, compartmentalized, I guess. But, like, there's nothing, like, wrong about the way they split it.
What about like the link debate, like the Zonder's audit evidence, and like the read evidence, but then like footnoting cap?
Sure, about the top of the K, right?
Yeah.
Read evidence.
Did like Brown take that out, or like, I mean like Reed's at the top again, and Zonder doesn't even fall.
Yeah, basically they make the argument that the performance of the 1AC, like the performance of the 1AC is a performative rejection of racism that also functions as a performative rejection of capitalism. So I don't think that.
Like the prerequisite
I
argument.
didn't know what the app was going to be.
You're a bad person.
So
Gonna
like,
throw things at the wall. So it's, yeah.
even if focus on race obfuscates class relations, the fact is that
They're soft.
hypervisibility means that
Pretty good
like,
for software.
oppression still operates on the level of like somatic bodily like markers.
last question, Dan.
Yeah.
Do you think Hudson on case probably would have answered Brown?
You're gonna have to tell me what Hudson says.
Blackness is not like inherent ontological, it's historically contingent. Like that means like it's not something that is prescribed. It means that it could like be subject to change at any time. Do you think that would help?
Yeah, because your argument is that
It's like
capitalism
analyze
created
history.
black, right? Because your argument is not that anti-blackness is ontological, it's that capitalism created anti-blackness as like a necessity to like create.
So would you have
Labor,
bought
shit like that.
would you have bought us reading that in the 2NC as a reason why you should prefer our methodology?
Yes.
Right, because if their affirmative can be explained by history, i.e., like anti-blackness being ontological, right? Our like alternative analyzes history and all that stuff, right?
Oh, like a reason to prefer dialectical materialism.
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Oh, I have a question. In one of your articles, should I spend more time with repository?
Probably.
Okay. But like, in terms of like the rest of the flow, did I do a good job covering it?
So like, their whole argument is that dialectical analysis of history like reveals that class is like the foundational antagonism, right? You should just be like the Uncle Toliver narrative is like a thing from history, right? Like we're doing an analysis of like generation has worked throughout history. So like we're performing, you know, we access history as well as something like that.
Do you think it would have been a powerful argument to say they can win that capitalism caused slavery, but if capitalism doesn't lead to race relations as they are now?
Yeah, that's what I voted on.
Okay.
That's how, yeah.
Just as long as we bring it to like,
Yeah, I'll bring it down.
when we see that.
Sorry, Dan.
Yeah.
One last thing.
Yeah.
How could the 2 have been improved? Like, where should he have sat and spent more time? Or do you think like it was like, I don't know, like what even if would have been like convincing on the Brown evidence?
Maybe even if the Brown evidence is true, the figure of the black body is actually constructed by class, right? So like the reason they're marked as such is because they were the original like second class that was created as a source of cheap labor or something like that.
Okay, so the Reed evidence then.
Yeah.